Hello and welcome to episode 34 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and as usual, I am joined by Joe Meade. Tonight, Joe and I will go over the biggest headline in the sport, in all of sports, probably today, and then we'll hit on a couple of the basketball games that happened last night and the night before. But Joe, I don't want to say the inevitable has happened, but Jim Harbaugh is moving on from Michigan after 9 years in charge. Obviously, 3 straight Big Ten titles and a national championship this year. He ends up going to the Chargers, which for all of our NFL fans is by far the most appealing job for anybody to take. And, as we've talked about many times before, he's been called 4 or 5 years in a row now, and this is the one that he ends up going. Joe, what are your initial thoughts on Harbaugh going to LA?
Yeah, I was in maybe the minority of people, and I don't know if it was delusion or maybe some misguided bit of logic, but I thought Jim was going to stay simply because I didn't think he would get all that he wanted in the NFL in terms of control. Certainly, I still don't know what that's all going to look like, but my best guess would be he has quite a bit, probably more than most head coaches could even dream of, besides a Belichick and maybe an O'Brien, but I wouldn't want to jinx Jimmy like that. Regardless, I do think he leaves on a very high note. I mean, the highest note you could leave on. Since Tom Osborne split the national title in 1997, funnily enough, with Michigan, no coach has not returned to coach the defending national champion since then. So, you know, certainly a lot of guys in the NFL, like we've covered, are not too many in the portal. I think I'm a broken record here, but they will definitely hire Sherrone Moore. The main holdup has been a clause the university has, which indicates they can't hire a head coach within 7 days. But I do believe they could get a special waiver that will get past that rule, because the special clause in that is it would be best for business and for ongoing business if a head coach was named, and I can't think of a more pressing situation. I mean, look what just happened to Alabama. The GOAT Nick Saban retires, and then they have 11 guys in the portal. So I think certainly Michigan wants to avoid that. I do think they will once they hire Sherrone. A lot of guys, they frankly have won their ring, so I don't think you're going to see too many guys chasing a ring. Certainly you could have guys chasing the money, but I seriously doubt that. Michigan's NIL program, often criticized, has stepped it up in the recent days, and the One More Year Fund continued to raise money even after the declarations, which indicated to me they kind of knew this would happen. So certainly don't think the sky is falling in Ann Arbor. I think Michigan football had a very nice tribute video to Jim. In terms of the rest of the conference, I'm sure a lot of people prepared for this. I don't know how happy teams would really be. I think there's so much going on with the added teams next year that maybe this takes a little off someone's plate, but I don't think it's a major ramification for every team in the conference. Certainly, you could look at Ohio State and Michigan State, who's going to have to play Michigan annually, and they'll certainly be happy, but I don't think they're going to go any less hard or prep any less time for the Wolverines. So overall, Sean, I think overall the Michigan fan base looks at Jim as the uncle, or maybe even the girl next door they always loved. Maybe you loved her from the time you were 9, and then you were both 18. You went to prom together. You had the magical ending. You both got what you wanted, and then you both went off to separate places across the country for college. And that's probably the best analogy for some of our listeners. So, yeah, Sean, definitely we'll have a lot of news coming from this. It won't necessarily be the Sherrone, but hopefully, for Michigan's sake, not too many portal guys, but certainly you never quite know at this day and age.
Yeah, I would think, from what I could tell, Joe, that, people saying that he was doing this all along after the NCAA stuff, I don't think that's the case. He clearly took his time thinking about it after the national championship, and he probably thought to himself, hey, this is as good as it's going to get. I cannot have a better season than this. And he said he went to Michigan, and he did what he set out to do, which was to bring them back to the top. And I truly think that any other NFL job comes calling, and he is not even answering the phone. We know he talked to the Falcons a little bit. That seems to be job number 2 that was just filled today. But Justin Herbert is an elite quarterback, and going back to Jim's time with the 49ers, he gets everything possible out of his quarterbacks, even back to Stanford when he was Andrew Luck's coach. So I think Chargers fans can be really happy. And like you said, no offense to Jim Harbaugh, but I don't think that it's that much of a drop-off. Sharon Moore was coach for, 4 games this year?
Yep.
And so the players already played for him for a third of the season. So I don't think there'll be much drop-off there. He coached some very good games, the road game at Penn State and Ohio State, right?
Yep. And Sean, just a quick analogy. I think a lot of people are fearful this could be a situation where, a first-time head coach steps into a place. The cautionary tale is Marcus Freeman. And I don't know about cautionary. I think the story's still to be written, but maybe in terms of the follow-up to an 11 and 1 year Brian Kelly had. But also, conversely, you could have a Kirby Smart or Dabo Swinney situation. I think maybe the truth lies in the middle there. You had Jimmy Lakes of the world at Washington, who people won't even remember that name, the guy right before Kalen DeBoer, who fell off after 2 seasons. So, no one quite knows the future. I do think Sharon is as well equipped to take this job, and frankly, for the stability of the program, he's going to have to take the job. So, maybe I don't even want to cover this because I doubt it's going to happen. You've seen Brian Kelly and Lance Leipold, guys with some ties to Michigan. Kelly obviously coached at Grand Valley here. Leipold recruits this area really well. I would highly doubt they'd even get an email, let alone a phone call from Michigan. So, yeah, Sean.
Yeah, I think they might call a couple other people just to say that they didn't interview. They did interview, like the other candidates, like Matt Rule. Like seriously, no. Like they're.
No, that's not happening.
It's gonna be Sharon Moore, and, unless something drastic happens. But, Joe, the good thing for him is that if you go 10-2 next year, you're probably in the college football playoff, which we talked. Alabama people have been talking about it. There's going to be some 2 and 3 loss teams playing in the playoff, and that is great news for new coaches because, if this Michigan team went 10-2, you'd be saying what a terrible disappointment of a year. But if you figure it out at the end of the year, you get hot, you could still win a national title. So I would expect Michigan to be there next year, Ohio State, maybe even a third Big Ten team, and. That's pretty much it on college football, Joe. Obviously, that's the big headline. Now, another rumor is that Jesse Minter might be going with him, and then Moore is obviously the offensive coordinator. So there will be some staff changes at Michigan, even if it is just a promotion from within. But other than that, Joe, I think we can move over to hoops.
Yeah, and the one note I'd add is, the big concern, I think Minter is kind of implied he'll leave. The next one is Ben Herbert, who strength coach, as we know, in any program. That's the culture setter right there. I don't know if his militaristic kind of approach would work in the NFL. He certainly he's getting paid over $1 million at Michigan. So, wait and see if you're a Michigan fan. I would lean he wouldn't go to the pros with that and the setup they have. And I think Michigan is making him the number one, if not number 2 priority to retain on staff. But Sean, let's talk some hoops.
So, Joe, we have actually a bunch of things to talk about even over the last 2 days, and we'll start with Tuesday, and that would be action that happened up at the barn in Minnesota. The Wisconsin Badgers survive against the Golden Gophers. Minnesota had a couple shots at the end to tie it. They come up empty, and Wisconsin picks up a road win in a place that, for how bad Minnesota's been, has kind of been a tough place to play. So the airplane hangar does not strike down the Badgers, and Wisconsin is leading the Big Ten right now. What are your thoughts on this one?
John, I think it was. I think that might have been Wisconsin's more impressive wins of the year. They were down most of the second half, from what I remember. Pretty balanced scoring overall, too. 16, 15, 11. And Chucky Hepburn didn't even do anything. I think he scored, 3 points? That was it.
Yep. One of 6 shooting.
Yeah, so with that said, Sean, and really no contribution off the bench from anyone. I know a few guys had a few baskets. That's what you want out of Wisconsin. I mean, you can't complain. What would you even rate their performance out of 10?
5?
Yeah.
But
normally you play a 5 against anyone, including even a Michigan team this year that's as bad as ever. You play a 5 on the road in the Big Ten, you put yourself in severe danger, and they did that. But, you know, like the time old tale says, um, being in danger versus danger actually getting you. That's not an actual saying. I just made it up. There is a huge difference between the two. And Wisconsin, regardless, is 7-1. Purdue, it's worth mentioning they've played one extra game, so only a half game up as of this recording. But I don't think we could have surveyed most people, Sean, who've watched Big Ten basketball and would tell you Wisconsin would only have one conference loss through 8 games.
yeah, Joe, I did flash the Big Ten standings up on the screen while you were talking there, and there seems to be a top two. We'll talk about the teams in third and fourth right now, but Wisconsin's always been able to kind of win these scrappy games, and they've always gotten after it defensively. But the reason why that they're at the top of the conference is because they've actually been able to score it, and I know they didn't really at the barn, but they are a top 10 offense, sixth in offensive efficiency in the country, and just 48th defensively. So you would think, like, the way that they guard, 48th is probably going to get better. So, the ceiling is real high if they're scoring it, and especially when they win when they don't score it, which has kind of always happened for Wisconsin. But at this point, I think we'd both agree that we'd be really surprised if Purdue doesn't win this title outright, but Wisconsin's right there, 7-1 through 8 games, and they have a big one that we'll talk about later up next, but they don't play Illinois on the road the rest of the way, and they have Purdue on the road in the last game of the year. That could be a potential Big Ten title decider at this point. So the other game on Tuesday, Joe, that we wanted to hit on was not the game that your team was involved in. I think we'll stay away from that.
Yeah.
For your.
We've already depressed Michigan fans enough on this podcast.
Yeah, no need to do that. But the second of the 3 games that night was Nebraska taking care of Ohio State at home. Pinnacle Bank Arena has proven to be a pretty tough place to play this year. The only team that has won there is the Creighton Blue Jays, and they play in the Big East. But they dispatch Ohio State. This team is certainly on the right side of the bubble right now, and if they can just bring a little bit of their home cooking to the road, they're going to be a lock NCAA tournament team.
Yeah, people who watched SpongeBob as a kid, the Flying Dutchman, and that's what Most or Mast. I couldn't even pronounce his last name. I don't think half the commentators in this country can. I want to point out. I do want to point out too. C.J. Wilcher off the bench with 16 points. Really good from Nebraska. Just a dominating performance. Even the first half, it was an 8-point lead at halftime, but you felt like this game was never going to be within reach for the Buckeyes. And Sean, I want to bring this up right after you get it, because I want your take. Is this road thing, it's been over probably 380 days since they've won a game on the road. Is this an actual, voodoo thing? I couldn't even tell you.
It might be. They are, night and day on the road, right? So here's their last 4 home games. Win against Indiana by 16, win against Purdue by 16, win against Northwestern by 6, win against Ohio State by 14. Those are all decent enough teams, and they won them all at home. Last 3 road games. Lost by 16 on the road to Wisconsin. Lost by 18 on the road at Iowa. Lost by 5 on the road at Rutgers. So these are, not the 6 points difference that people say between home and road. These are 20-point, 40-point, in some instances, difference between winning by 16 and losing by 18. It's part of getting, part of getting to the middle of the pack in this conference is winning your home games, and part of getting to the top is winning road games. You don't have to go 10-0 on the road. You probably can go 5-5 and feel really good about where you're at. But Joe, it is definitely beyond, this, their style of play should be able to travel. They clearly are good enough at home to at least compete in some of these road games, and at this point they're just not. I think it is mental at this point. And Nebraska away used to be the game that people could go and win, and that's certainly not the case anymore. But they've got a tough road game up next against a team that's sort of turned it around, and we can get to that after. But you have to like where you're at this point for Nebraska.
Yeah, Sean. And, conversely, on the exact same subject, Sean, Ohio State, man, they, I was mainly referring to them for some of our viewers not to confuse them, because, you could have brought it with both teams. Ohio State needs to figure out how to win on the road, man. It's really bad.
Yeah,
And
that
you
makes
look
sense. Yeah.
you look at their next 4 games, even, Sean. You got at Northwestern, hosting Illinois, at Iowa, and then Indiana. Even you could even trickle that into the next 3 after Maryland at home, at Wisconsin, Purdue, and they go through. If you look at their February schedule, I encourage people on whatever app you have to do so. There's a plausible situation of those 8 games. They could probably lose 6 or 7 of them, and that's nothing to do with Ohio State being a bad team or being a badly coached team. Nothing. It's just if you assume they lose every road game, which at this point is a fair presumption, they've proven to you. Through 2023, they won 1 or 2 road games, and in 24, they're on their way to not winning a single one. The way they play on the road, are Ohio State's hopes for March Madness on life support, or how would you categorize it?
It's not great, Joe. They have 0 true road wins this year, and they do have a neutral court win against Alabama, who's awesome, and 30-point neutral court win over Santa Clara, but they're not good enough at home to be bad on the road, if that makes sense. They lost to Texas A&M, a good, solid team at home. They lost to Wisconsin, a good, solid team at home. And they've lost every other road game. They've lost road games to Penn State, Indiana, Michigan. Some of these teams, those 3 at least are headed towards, at the very minimum, a middle 7 to 10 range finish at this point. But, yeah, I think it is. The road game at Northwestern, home game against Illinois. You'd like to see them get one of those because they do have Purdue at home, but they play Wisconsin again, and there are just not enough good wins in this conference this year compared to other years where if you win 4 in a row, 3 of those are good wins, and you're shooting up the projections, but there's just not at this point. And I don't think it's too early. Well, it's definitely not too early because they're not in the tournament as of now, and there's very few signs pointing to that they will turn it around because they're horrendous on the road. They do not make shots in road games, Joe. They have not reached. I'm going back 7 or 8 road games here. They have not reached 70 on the road this year, other than the Penn State game. So that's supposed to be their thing. Holtman's offenses have been great over the years, but definitely alarm bells. But I don't know if it's voodoo or anything for the Buckeyes because they don't win tough games at home and lose easier road games like Nebraska might because they take care of business at home. It's just they might not be a very good team, and when your good players don't play well, you're really not going to be a good team. So move the calendar over one day to the action last night, and a couple of really good ball games. First, Maryland went on the road, picked up their 2nd unexpected road win of the year. They take down the Iowa Hawkeyes 69-67 at Carver Hawkeye. Iowa did not score for a long period at the end of the game. I'm getting the exact time here. So they scored .67, Iowa did. All right, so they made a couple free throws, but they did not make a field goal, Joe. And I'm still scrolling. 5:44, Peyton Sanford hit a jumper. That was their last bucket of the game. Is this more impressive on Maryland's end or more disappointing from Iowa?
I'm going to do the politician's answer. It's really impressive from Maryland considering that they dropped that was almost a heartbreaker. I categorized against Michigan State on Sunday. I would say so.
They're right there.
Yeah.
They're right there with Northwestern on the road, too.
Yeah, fell down in a huge hole against State, came all the way back with that ruckus crowd. And then to respond against Iowa, and you thought Iowa put the lights out of them, really. It was a typical Iowa win at home, right? Making everything. Maryland's falling behind there. And if you look at the score, Sean, Iowa, for most of the second half, had a 7-point lead at the beginning. And then from there, Maryland just kept clawing back. And they went back and forth, and that's a game you normally see Iowa win at home simply because they don't miss. And the statistic to transition right into Iowa, if your offense is going to play like that at home against the team, let's face it, they're similar caliber in terms of what you'd expect out of them. Clearly different stylistically. I think that leads me to my point, Sean. This Saturday at Chrysler Arena, to a team they've already lost to at home, if they lose that, their hopes for March, I don't even think they're on life support. They're on miracle support. They'll be lights out if they lose to Michigan. Is there any question about that?
No, Maryland has turned it around recently, and they're 3-2 in their last 5, and both losses were real close against good teams. But both these teams right now are not tournament teams, and usually the 7th or 8th team in the Big Ten is pretty solidly in the field, and that's not going to be the case this year. No, I think we're looking towards 6. I did a bracketology before yesterday's games, and I was a little bit surprised of actually how good the Big Ten's numbers are, especially because, the non-conference was rough, but, a couple teams have been able to beat Purdue. But I got Purdue at the 1, Illinois at the 4, but that's a little interesting because of Shannon coming back and where that leads them. And then after that, Joe, it goes all the way to, Wisconsin at the 3, Illinois at the 4. After that, it goes all the way to Northwestern at a 9, Michigan State at a 10, Nebraska at an 11. So that's 6, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So you got 6 teams in the field right now. 3 of them are not going to be wearing their home jerseys in the round of 64. Maybe we'll get 7, but no Big Ten teams were in my last 7 out or first 7 out. So, usually I think you'd be okay with losing a game against, if you're the 7th best team, you lose a game to the 8th team. All right, it wasn't your day, but got to beat those teams now because they're not considered the good wins that they used to be. But at this point, Maryland and Iowa both. I know Maryland's been playing better and their defense is really good, but at this point, both are on the outside looking in, barring a pretty impressive run. But yeah, not much to like from Iowa's point of view here.
No, and Sean, can I just get confirmation from you? If they lose to Michigan on Saturday, are they done?
I mean, yeah.
That's lights out.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan's numbers are, a whole lot better than their record. They're actually just 14 spots behind Maryland, so, numbers-wise...
I'm talking about Iowa.
Oh, okay.
Iowa losing to
so
Michigan.
Iowa is 49th, Michigan's 80th, so that'll probably be a Iowa 2-point spread analytically, not on the betting sites, but numbers-wise, it's probably not such a horrible loss, but you got to start winning games.
Yeah.
It's just that simple.
You
haven't
and 11-8 is your record. That's not good.
You haven't slayed a big dog yet, and if you lose to the team in last, you have to beat a team up in the top to make up for it. But not looking great bracket-wise for volume of the Big Ten teams. Obviously, 3 teams pretty confidently headed for protected 4 seeds, which is good. And then Michigan State is trending up, I would say. But middle of the pack, we've kind of said all year that it's going to get ugly in the middle, and maybe this isn't quite the way that we thought. We thought they'd be beating up on each other a lot, but they're all kind of doing that, which is hurting overall. Other game Wednesday, Joe, we've got Northwestern hosting Illinois in the in-state Illinois rivalry at Wells Shrine Arena. And the Wildcats knock them off 96-91 in OT. Boo Buie goes crazy, 29 points. Barnheiser adds 23. And Illinois gets 22 from Hawkins and Domask, but ultimately they come up short. But this is just one of those vintage Northwestern home wins, I think. What about you?
Yeah, I don't think this is... I think this is just signature college basketball. I mean, some of the chants got pretty ugly, but besides that, no, Boo Buie... I mean, was this vintage Boo Buie or what?
If you think about Boo Buie, what comes to mind other than a 30-point home performance against a team that is better than them, but they end up winning because they have the best player?
Yeah, and, from Illinois' perspective, too, I don't think they played all that bad. I think Northwestern made some ridiculous shots. I think if they play this game, even at Welsh Ryan, 8 out of 10 times, probably Illinois wins. This was just the ninth or the 10th time. And unfortunately, it just fell one of those nights. And Northwestern, I'm going to make one criticism, and it's barely anything. Per usual, the bench did nothing, and they still won. That won't happen again. I'll make that very clear. I think they're due for a game where, maybe Bowie goes off for 30 and Barnheiser even chips in an extra 15. But since their bench does nothing, they'll lose. Now, is that going to be coming anytime soon? Who really knows? I do think Ohio State Northwestern Saturday could be a really good game. I think Ohio State's going to come to that game really desperate. And I do think Northwestern, after that emotional high on Wednesday, could maybe, we saw that last year against Michigan, where they had an emotionally high victory the 2 games before, 2 games in a row, actually, and then started feeling themselves a little too much. And perhaps that happens. Perhaps they're going to look toward the Purdue game next Wednesday. So I think that could be a really intriguing game. Regardless, Sean, I don't think there's any concern for either of these teams based on this performance. You just chalk it up to that's college basketball.
And Northwestern has the Chicago State loss, but they have Purdue and Illinois home wins. Those are quad 1A wins. So, the Chicago State loss might push them down a seed line, but I would think that they're pretty close. They're pretty safe at this point. Nobody around the bubble has those wins, and quite a few of them have Q4 losses. So they're looking real good. I agree with you there. I don't think a tournament run is on the cards, or even a Big Ten tournament run. To get that performance 4 times in a row, for example, it's just not going to happen. Maybe you get it once, maybe twice, but they're kind of one-dimensional. But they're pretty good when they get Boo Buie to go, which he's done very frequently over the past couple of years. But Joe, or go ahead.
Yeah, Sean, I think before we wrap, we wanted to preview some of the weekend games, like Friday. Yeah.
Yeah, so Friday night on FS1, we've got Michigan State going to the Kohl Center to play Wisconsin. Fox Sports 1, second straight week, Wisconsin's on Friday. This is an interesting one, Joe. I think Wisconsin is, they had an easy win last Friday against Indiana despite only winning by 12. That game was not within 7 in the second half, and then you survive on the road, and now you get to come back home against a team that is very capable of beating you. ESPN's given Wisconsin a 2/3 chance here. We don't have a spread yet, but what are the keys that you'll be looking out for in this one?
I think it's just going to be containment of Tyson Walker. I don't think you're going to stop him, as most people have figured out by now. I don't think they could let another guy get more than 15, Sean. Simple as that. I think their scoring has been pretty balanced. Certainly, you don't want an offensive repeat of what you had against the Gophers. I don't think that'll happen for the Kohl Center. And it's just a typical key. Like, this is what happened when they played Marquette. Clearly, that was a different caliber win than against Michigan State. But don't let Michigan State, hang around. That's when they're most dangerous. And that's what Maryland, unfortunately, not they let them hang around, but when you have a lead, extend the lead. Don't let Michigan State is the last team on earth, especially with Tyson Walker, you want hanging anywhere near you. So I think for Wisconsin, just ride the crowd. I would be shocked if this wasn't another raucous crowd like it was against Indiana. Probably even more so, considering Michigan State. And keep in mind, Wisconsin did beat them at the Breslin in December. So perhaps this is maybe a litmus test for Michigan State. I do think they've gotten a lot better since that game. I think ever since the Baylor and Indiana State game, this has been an entirely different team. They've had some tough losses. And for all I know, this is the game they finally closed it out against a really, really good opponent. And Sean, this would be a way better win than the Baylor game. Baylor was at a neutral game and practically a home game at LCA. So I think this is a really exciting game. And for Michigan State, I don't think it's even close to the must-win category yet, but boy, would it help you out.
Yeah, it's more of a, how good are you game for Michigan State. If they lost handily at home to this same team. If they hang around in this game and end up losing by 2, then I think you'll feel pretty good about the team going forward, even though they're 12-8. They're gonna win games against teams that they should. And, the calendar very soon is turning to the month that Tom Izzo and Michigan State have dominated over the years. But Wisconsin has to win this game if they want to win the Big Ten. You can't lose a home game to a team in the upper middle pack. You just can't. And AJ Storr went off last time, but other than that, they didn't really have a great performance from anybody else. So you would think that the Michigan State coaching staff will figure him out. Crowell had 18, but he made all 4 threes he took. He only made 6 shots. So, other than that, you only had John Blackwell off the bench have 10. So I think Michigan State is playing better, and they finally did get over the hump on the road. They had a couple pretty good performances away from home. At Illinois, they played pretty solid, and then they got the win at Maryland. But this is a big one. Michigan State gets this, and they get rolling. They do not have... they have Illinois as their only ranked game in February, and that is at home. And Joe, they you love looking at the next stretches. It's hard to find a better one than Michigan State. So you get this Wisconsin game, you get Michigan at home, Maryland at home, Minnesota on the road, Illinois at home, Penn State on the road, Michigan on the road, Iowa at home, Ohio State at home. I would favor them in every single one of those games that I just said at this point. And
even Illinois, I'd favor them.
Even Illinois at home. And, if you're favored in 11 straight games, chances are you're going to win 8 or 9 of them. So this is if they lose this game, they're probably headed towards a 7, 8, or 9 seed, and they might end up picking somebody off and getting to the Sweet 16. But if they do win it, I think they can go on a pretty spectacular run here. But it's just one of those games that I think we'll look back on, and if Wisconsin ends up losing the Big Ten by a game because they dropped this one or something like that, I think we'll say, well, that game really changed the season for whoever won it. So we'll turn the calendar to Saturday. We've got another game that I think means a lot, sort of long term. We've got Nebraska going to Maryland, 12 noon Eastern on BTN. We've talked about Maryland playing a little better recently. We've talked about Nebraska struggling on the road. What's going to give here? Something has to.
I have no read on the game, Sean.
I wouldn't be shocked if this was 15 or 30 point either way, 15-point win for either team.
Yeah, there's 10 different situations I could see this game ending up in and not be shocked if Joe Meade from the future came. So I really have to ride with Maryland simply because, and not that they've been even that great at home, simply because Nebraska showed me nothing on the road to indicate that they can win. That's the only logic I'll go off, because anything else goes out the door with these two teams of late.
I think I'll throw the standings back up here for a second, Joe, and you see those top 5 teams in the conference. That's Wisconsin, Illinois, Purdue, Northwestern, Nebraska. Those teams are pretty solidly in the tournament right now, and then we have Michigan State in too. But those other teams, Ohio State, Maryland, Indiana, Iowa, there is probably a half a tournament bid available for those 4 teams. And this would go a long way for Maryland if they win. Because, Joe, their numbers have gotten better, and they get to 13-8 with a win here. And for how horribly they started the year, I mean, they're definitely trending in the right direction. I'm not saying they're going to make the tournament, but there's at least a path to, if they win this game. They do have the road win at Illinois, which is important. They have the road win at Iowa. The committee loves road wins in a year where I feel like we hear it every year, Joe, but road teams are winning games or not winning games this year, especially ranked, especially home away teams who are ranked. 50% of ranked top 10 teams on the road lose, and that is it's usually in the low 60s, and I think it's at 48 or something. I saw that stat after Northwestern won yesterday, but they have a couple road wins, and if you can win another win against a tournament team, you're going to be trending towards the right direction. In Nebraska, 15-5, they're going to be gunning for the double bye if they pick this off. So this is another one that I think we can look at the end of the year and be like, well, Nebraska grabbed the 4 seed because they won this road game. But could go either way. Wouldn't be surprised. We've got a couple other games on Saturday, Joe. We've got Indiana visiting Illinois. Iowa visiting Michigan and Minnesota visiting Penn State. But anything to talk about from any of those three? I don't think the result. Well, Michigan did beat Iowa once already, but not really looking out for much long term in any of those three games.
No, the only thing is I'm not even trying to get Hoosier fans up like yours, Sean, but maybe win that game changes everything around, but I don't see a path to victory, frankly.
Yeah, they've had more than a week off, so you'd think maybe you get a defensively locked in effort because you're going to need it. But this is one of those games where you're probably not going to make the tournament. So you've got a fairly easy February with only 3 road games out of 7, and 2 of those are against teams that you can beat, or one that you've already beaten. So, maybe you can build on something here. You get Iowa at home, and then Penn State at home, and then maybe you get a run going. But Indiana did sweep them last year, including a 17-point win at Illinois, who was ranked at the time. But don't think the Fighting Illini from last year can be compared to this year's team at all. The chemistry wasn't there, and now it is. And Terrence Shannon's back. He only had 12 last game, but he's getting, his minutes up, and it's just not a great fit defensively for Indiana. But who knows? We have seen crazier things happen. I mean, Maryland went in there and won, and I think we can say that Indiana is a better team than Maryland. But
yeah,
Iowa at Michigan. Could see the road win there if Iowa does pull it off. They're coming off a loss. Michigan is coming off a humbling loss to Purdue. I don't really think that game.
Humbling, more like a schoolyard beating.
Yeah, you want to talk about the Nick Stauskas comments real quick?
Yeah, no, yeah. I'm glad you asked. Yeah, I think Nick was spot on. I don't think it was just about that game, though. I think it was just in general, just the whole vibe of the season's been off, and I'm not trying to blame one singular person. I think it's on a lot of people. I've already ripped Ward Mail to shreds on this podcast before, so I don't think I'll be getting any Christmas gifts from the athletic department anytime soon. But no, Sean, I think when Beeline's players left, like especially the last batch, like Eli Brooks went out of there, and especially Livers in the COVID year, Michigan just lost so many close games. And those were games they wouldn't always win under Beeline. They'd win 60 to 70% of them, not only because of his coaching, but because of those guys just had been there before. They were used to it. Now looks like Michigan's deer in headlights in those games, and finally getting destroyed by a team. And frankly, Purdue was a team that Michigan used to be. Not in terms stylistically, but a team that would just always win at home, clobber the bad teams. And it's kind of a full circle moment in a bad way of how far we've really fallen. But, I hope if you're a Michigan fan still listening, I haven't made you too sad. Just watch the hockey team and watch the other sports, because basketball, you would need a miracle of miracles to do anything from this season.
I think it's pretty shocking that, from what I can understand, Joe, that Michigan basketball account is leaving it up. I mean, like a former player calling you out like that, like he might be right in everything that he's saying, but you got to get rid of that comment. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? But he was a Beeline guy, and I think we can spend a whole episode on the direction of Michigan basketball in the offseason, Joe.
Absolutely.
But, looking back on it, and you were obviously a fan who lived through it, but somebody who'd watch them maybe 4 or 5 times a year, John Beeline did a terrific job there, and it may have started off slow, but looking back at the 2 previous coaches, I mean, he transformed that program from the Tommy Amaker and even Steve Fisher days to an extent. But so he was definitely, I think, the exception rather than the norm, and it is good that somebody from Michigan is calling him out, because we've talked about it a couple times. We don't think they're going to fire Juwan. They're going to ask him, "Are you sure you really want to be the coach still?" I mean, you have however many million from playing in the NBA, and you don't have to be waking up early every day to do this. But we'll see about that later. Joe, almost at 40 minutes, so I think we'll wrap it up here. Ohio State does visit Northwestern. We'd expect Northwestern to win that game, but after a big game, could go either way. And then Purdue visits Rutgers on Sunday. But anything to add with those 2 before we wrap it up?
I would be shocked if Ohio State Northwestern did not go down to the very last minute. I think Ohio State is absolutely desperate for a signature win. And I know the Bama and I know the Santa Clara, and I get it. but you need a win on the road. Sean, you've emphasized it enough on this podcast today, so I'm not going to go too far into it. But my God, Ohio State, you've been right there in a lot of home games and even road games. I'm even including the Michigan one. This is kind of your opportunity. Maybe you catch Northwestern sleeping. And frankly, you have to hope for that kind of a little, right? Maybe you get out to a big lead. I don't think Ohio State would blow them out in this game, but there is a way Northwestern is on the highest of highs and blows Ohio State out. So I think the start of this game, the first 10 minutes, I think the biggest thing for Ohio State is hope Northwestern's napping and make them pay. So
We've seen it happen before with both of our teams, with every team, and then Zach Edey comes to New Jersey on Sunday, 1 o'clock on Fox. Rutgers has been, pretty solid at home this year. Only the one loss to Illinois in the league, but I would be really surprised. Amori is long and good at defense, but they just don't have the scoring to hang with Purdue. But Joe, that's all we have for him today. I'm not sure when we'll be with you next, but be sure to like and subscribe, and I hope everyone enjoyed the new theme song. I hope it went through. We couldn't hear it from our end, but it told me it was playing, so hopefully it went through. Hopefully it sounded good, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.